Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Educast 3000 podcast. I'm your co-host, Ryan Lufkin, and today I'm joined by our frequent guest host, Zach Pendleton.
Hello, and thank you, Ryan. It's so great to be back here on the podcast, and I'm especially excited about today's guest. Today we've got Giorgio Lagna, PhD, Assistant Professor in Residence at the UCSF Cardiovascular Research Institute, Lecturer in Biology at Santa Clara University, and at Foothill College, and a pioneer in using AI in the classroom. So, Giorgio, that's a lot of accomplishments, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's a privilege to join you.
I'm excited for this one. So, Giorgio, before we jump into today's topic, share a little bit more about yourself so our audience can get to know you better.
Sure. So I am a biologist by training, not a teacher, and I came to AI in the classroom sideways. My work has been originally in molecular and cellular biology for a long time, both in industry and academia. With the usual chase of Nature and Cell papers, so that classic academic career. But somewhere along the way, I noticed a pattern that bothered me among the students working with me. So students with the best transcripts often struggled when they were coming to an experiment in the lab. And students with unremarkable transcripts often didn't. They did very well. So that inversion is what drove me to think a little bit more about redesigning undergraduate biology. Whatever the elite credential was measuring, it was not what I cared about. So I went back to undergraduate teaching to see if it was possible to design a course so students learn concepts, not just facts. And so today I do that work in 3 different places. As you guys mentioned earlier, a research lab at UCSF, the Cardiovascular Research Institute. I also have a biology lectureship at Santa Clara University and an anatomy and physiology classroom at Foothill College. The bad news about that is that currently I'm the worst programmer in any of those 3 rooms. And so I'm just trying to learn enough code to be useful to my own CRISPR research, which keeps me humble between the commutes.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. One of the things I love about coming on the podcast is that I get the chance to ask guests about their favorite learning moment. So, you talked a little bit there about coding and about your journey, but could you share for us a favorite learning moment for you, whether as a teacher or as a learner?
Yeah, so actually my favorite learning moment is still happening right now. It's the project I'm running at Foothill with the MESA students. MESA serves first generation and historically underrepresented students in STEM. And students at a community college almost never get to do research grade molecular biology. The infrastructure just isn't there. The grant funding isn't there. The expectation isn't there. So what we are doing is the first project, I think, of this kind in that program. We are designing a CRISPR-based treatment for a rare disease called alkaptonuria. And it's caused by a single gene, but it's mutated in 323 different ways across the patient population. So it's a hard problem. And our system uses 6 different CRISPR and transgenic approaches that hopefully altogether can target every one of those 323 mutations. And what I'm learning is week after week is that AI changes who can do this kind of work. With a biologist guiding the strategy and an AI system handling the modeling and the verification at every step, students who do not yet have advanced biology or programming skills can play meaningful roles here as the controllers and verifiers of the science. They're not just bystanders. They are not handling handing the work to a machine. They are running the verification path that catches when the AI gets things wrong. So that's what I'm still learning. The unit of research is no longer the single principal investigator with the grant. The unit is now a small team of humans and agents, and a community college student can be one of those humans.
That's awesome. Well, and one of the reasons I got so excited about this conversation when your name came up, and it's something that Zach and I have been spending some time talking about, and frankly, we'll be talking about it in StructureCon as well. But we've kind of entered that show and tell phase of AI, right? There's a there's so many uses for these innovative tools. A lot of ways it's just kind of helping people understand what's possible or where to start. What got you started using AI? In you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what got you using AI in your courses?
Right. So honestly, the spark was not AI or the emergence of the AI systems. It was COVID. So I had only just started teaching back in 2018, and when classes moved online for everyone in 2020, I started receiving batches of student assignments that were essentially the same essay, um, clearly shared, lightly edited, and but functionally identical. So this was before any of the current AI tools existed. So I don't think AI broke the assessment. The assessment was already broken. And so around the same time, I had a conversation with, which I will never forget, with at a UCSF lab with a student from a very well-established Bay Area university, let's say, who could generally design a control experiment that even most postdocs would have struggled with. And I asked her, where did you actually learn to do this? Was it in class? And she said, nope. In class, she attended lectures and took exams. Everything she knew about how to actually think as a scientist came from internships where people had asked her
Mm.
hard questions and made her defend her answers. She remembered almost nothing from her classroom courses. So that was the moment the design problem became obvious to me.
Yeah.
If students remember the question they had to defend and forget the lectures they just sat through, the job is to put those questions back in the classroom. And AI is the only tool that I know of and that I've ever seen that can do that at scale for every student every week.
That's great. So, as you talk about, that type of use of AI, I hear you've also been using these Socratic AI, tutor gems. I think a lot of teachers are still trying to figure out where AI fits in the classroom. Could you talk a little bit more about, what your experience has been there and what some of your learnings are?
Sure. So the original problem that I was trying to solve was that office hours don't work very well. I think office hours have always been the best part of a university education, as they have always been the part, unfortunately, they have always been the part that most students don't show up to. I wanted office hours that came to them.
Oh yeah.
What I was really doing, of course, was reinventing the wheel in a way, or the Socratic method, which has been around for what, 2,400 years
Mm-hmm.
already, and it has never had a tool that could do it patiently and individually, for 50 students at the same time, even the night before a class. That's until now. So now, when the opportunity came, I generated this first version of a tool, and that showed up at Foothill College in December 2024. And it was for anatomy and physiology students. I called it Footsie, which is a play on the Foothill mascot name. And so over the next year and a half, I adapted it for 3 different classes at Santa Clara, where I renamed it AIDA. The official reason is that AIDA stands for AI-driven assistant. The honest reason is that I'm a huge opera buff, so I wanted to stick
Yeah.
that name in there at some point.
We need to do another podcast about opera, you and me. That'd be great.
Looking
Yeah.
forward to that. Yes,
We already have branch offs. We're
Yeah.
perfect. AIDA and AI and,
Yeah.
and opera. So the current generation of AIDA is in my Biology 2 course at Santa Clara, the one that I call the Crucible, because it's a melting pot of all kind of ideas that I'm testing. There are actually 13 gems running right now in that course, and one of them is called Toll Booth. These are the gates at the end of each unit. Boss battle bots is the other type. This is where students argue with during exams. And then there are certification gems that the students consult before their oral exams. In addition to this, there are 3 notebook LMs that provide the material that students can study before the units. So everything is embedded in Camino, which is what Santa Clara calls its instance of Canvas. And every iteration pretty much taught me the same lesson from a slightly different angle, which is that students who want a quick answer already know how to get one from any LLM, right? So the interesting design problem is to build something that they would never bother to ask an LLM in the first place. It's something different. And that's what I've been trying to implement there.
So how do those gems encourage deeper thinking and inquiry rather than just giving the answers?
Right. So most AI tools right now are built to answer fast or faster. The faster, the better.
Mm-hmm.
So the toll booth is built to question longer. And so that's the entire design principle in one sentence. The gem is explicitly prompted to refuse to give the answer. So if a student types, just tell me what the answer is here. The gem responds by asking why they think they need it. How is that important for them? What are they looking for? And so the reason this matters is grounded in learning science, actually. So Robert Bjork at UCLA has spent decades showing that durable learning requires what he calls desirable difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
So the student has to struggle just a little bit, just enough in this productive zone where effort is rewarded, but guessing is not. And so quick answers mean quick forgetting, generally. So the gem is engineered to stay in that productive struggle zone for a while. It asks one question at a time, not five, so the student is not overwhelmed. It checked the student's reasoning at every step instead of accepting an answer at face value. And then it nudges in the right direction when the student is stuck. But it does not hand over the conclusion ever. In addition, it remembers what the students worked through last week because it knows the name of each student. So the next conversation picks up where the last one left off. And a typical exchange would look like this. For example, a student opens the toll booth the night before the class. Instead of a quiz, they get a conversation that lasts 5 to 10 minutes, where the gem keeps asking them to defend what they just said. By the time they reach the checkpoint, hopefully they have explained the concept like 3 or 4 times in slightly different words every time. So they walk into class the next morning already in the middle of thinking about the topic. Now, the gem never told them the answer, but they worked it out as they were going.
So you mentioned another type of gem during your in-class boss battles. What is that exactly?
Yeah, so I've differentiated my gems in 3 different types in this course that I call the Crucible. So the toll booth gem refuses to give the answer. I already explained how that works. Mm-hmm. The certificate gem, which we'll get to in a few minutes, runs the oral exam. And the boss battle gem, which is what your question is about, gives wrong answers on purpose. So I thought that's sort of something that is a little different from what people use AI for. So the boss battle gems are used in the classrooms, and students use them and consult them during exams and during what we call boss battles, which are simulated crisis scenarios on a timer. Let's say teams might find themselves in an emergency room with a patient in a sickle cell crisis. They might be working on a patient who has taken too many supplements and is now in lactic acidosis. And the situation deteriorates as they work, the way a real crisis would, until they figure out what is happening and intervene, and the patient is saved. So the gem is on call as their AI consultant throughout all that process. It helps, but it also lies on purpose. So the student knows that the errors are there. They don't know what the errors are, obviously. So their job is to find them, tag them, and explain what is wrong before the patient on the simulated table gets any worse.
Wow.
And the more errors they catch, the higher they score. So the standard worry about AI in education is that students will believe whatever the chatbot tells them, right? The standard response to that has been to either ban AI or to teach students to be vaguely critical. Neither works in my experience. Hallucinations are not a bug in my classroom. They are the assignment. If you're going to let AI into the room, you have to teach students to argue with it. So I built an AI for them to argue with and not just believe in.
That's like, I love that because
it's fascinating.
Yeah, it totally gets this idea that, increasingly in our roles in the workplace, we are managing AI agents and we're managing their outputs, and we have to be critical. Like, this actually creates an experience where they're doing just that.
Yeah, what a powerful tool for building literacy.
Yeah.
Right? Could you talk a little bit more then about that student experience? When a student comes into class or when they're interacting with one of these things outside of class, like what practically does that look like for them?
All right, so let's picture a Santa Clara student at, let's say, 11 o'clock at night, the night before class, of course, last minute. So she opens Camino, and the toll booth for tomorrow is the first thing that she sees. She cannot get to the rest of the assignment without going through it. So that's literally the toll booth. So let's say that tomorrow is a class on vaccines. So she clicks in and the gem says, "Welcome to the toll booth for level 3. Which class are you preparing for?" And she types the date, then the gem opens with the actual content question. If a vaccine has a weakened virus or just a piece of a virus, how does it teach your immune system to recognize the real virus later? And so the student now starts typing, and the design rules are pretty strict. The gem never gives more than 4 sentences and never asks more than 1 question at a time. If she answers correctly, the gem doesn't say, "Correct, you got it." It actually says something like, "Oh, but a classmate told me the opposite. Who's right?" Right? So the gem is challenging and kind of starting a conversation here rather than just being an examiner. And so somewhere in the conversation, it will plant one deliberate factual error, the same technique that I scale up in the boss battle gems. And then a few turns later, it will actually say, "Did you notice that what I said a couple of sentences ago? You didn't fight me on that. Do you think I was correct?" And so the students now knows that they missed something, and that they should have paid attention. Of course, some students actually pick it right away and they say, "Hey, no, I don't agree with what you're saying right there." So by the time she reaches the checkpoint, she has explained vaccine mechanism 3 or 4 times, caught a gem error, hopefully, and pasted the whole transcript into Camino. The next morning, when I walk into the classroom, every student in the room has had a real Socratic conversation about vaccines. And so we don't start from 0, we start from where the toll booth left off.
Wow, that's cool.
Fantastic.
So you mentioned those AI examiner gems. Tell us a little bit more about that and kind of your inspiration behind those.
Yeah. So I call those the certification gems in the course. That's the 3rd gem type. So at the end of each unit in the Crucible, students sit down for an oral exam. That's not a multiple choice, not an essay, a 5-minute conversation with a gem first that asks, probes, follows up, and eventually scores how they did. The inspiration is simple here. Oral exams, as I mentioned earlier, have been around 24 centuries already, and Socrates ran them. So obviously they have a long history that has worked. Oxford and Cambridge have been running viva voce defenses for centuries, and PhD candidates still do them right now. They work because they are essentially the only assessment students cannot fake their way through. Universities abandoned them at the undergraduate scale, not because they were ineffective, but because they were expensive.
Yeah.
There was no way to give every student in a 50-person class a 5-minute one-on-one conversation. So AI is changing that. There is a story in the press right now about universities running back to oral exams because they're scared of AI cheating, right? So Penn is doing it, Cornell is doing it, NYU did it for about $15 across 36 students. about 42 cents per student, and it made national news. What's different in the Crucible is the direction of travel. Most universities are running back to oral exams to escape AI. I'm using AI to make oral exams scale. So the only way to ask every student to defend their understanding out loud is to give every student an AI that can listen, probe, and score what they say.
Well, and that's, I mean, you talk about them kind of falling back to oral exams. So many of them are falling back even further and going back to handwritten, proctored exams,
blue books.
which is even less scalable, right?
Absolutely. Yes. I don't think that's the way to go.
So what does that experience look like for a student that's actually taking one? Maybe we covered this already, but what does that look like for a student that's actually going through that experience?
Yeah, so from the student perspective, the oral exam looks a bit like this. At the end of a unit, the student opens the certification gem inside Camino, and it's a voice conversation, not a chat. The gem opens with a single question about the unit. Let's say in the immunity unit, something like, explain to me why a virus that has mutated can sometimes escape a vaccine that worked perfectly well last year. And the student answers out loud in their own words. The gem listens, and if the answer is right but shallow, the gem might ask them to go a little bit deeper. If the answer is partly wrong, the gem might ask them to defend that part that doesn't sound right. They can't write a perfect essay and submit it. They can't ask another chatbot to draft the answer. They are in a conversation in real time with an examiner that has read their unit transcript and knows where the soft spots are already. So the session runs about 5 to 10 minutes, and at the end, the gem produces a transcript and a score as an encrypted code. So the student doesn't really know exactly how they did yet. But if the student passes, they are certified for that unit. If they don't, they get specific feedback on what to study, and they can attempt the certification again. Actually, I have had students do that 3-4 times. I don't mind. My concept is similar to passing a driving test.
Yeah.
Nobody cares what grade you got in your driving test. Nobody cares how many times you did it. The important point is, can you drive?
Yeah, the iteration is part of the learning, right? That's the whole point.
It should be, at least, but very often it's a one shot, right? Either you pass or not pass in a regular exam. So eventually, once the certification is done, the transcript goes into Camino with the score, the timestamp, and the code that then I can decrypt to know how the students did. And the important thing here is that everything is auditable and can be checked.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Now, I love the conversation about scale, right? Because I think that, to your point, scaling concerns are some of what has kept oral assessment from being more widely used. Even though I think it is an interesting assessment type, and there are some things that would recommend it. Looking to what you're doing now, right? Using AI to try to bring the best of that forward. What's your experience been like scaling the AI solution?
Yeah, the scale problem is actually quite real, and the equity problem is a big part of it. So authentic oral assessments used to be a privilege of small seminars and Oxford tutorials. Most American undergraduates have never been asked to defend an idea out loud to an examiner, not because that kind of assessment doesn't work, but because there was never enough faculty time to give it to every student. So we settled for an assessment that can be scaled. Multiple choice, short essays, the kind of assessment that a confident student that can outsource their thinking can survive well, and a less practiced student cannot, regardless of which one actually understands the material better. The AI examiner doesn't lower the standard. It removes the bottleneck of having to be the most confident student in the room. So this matters everywhere, but it matters most at Foothill, for example, in the MESA and the and other similar programs, where many of my students are first generation or multilingual or working night shifts or raising kids or many other situations. So these students were never going to get a 5-minute Socratic conversation with a tenured professor every week. Now they can get one before every class meeting and another at the end of every unit. I actually have data on this and how it can be helpful. So with two colleagues at Santa Clara, I published a study earlier this year in the Journal of College Science Teaching that presents what we call the DISCO framework. Essentially, the students who came in as strong writers stayed strong by the end, and the students who came in struggling improved substantially. So this was evidence that the AI didn't level the top of the curve, but it lifted the bottom. That is the equity story of AI in higher education that I look forward to.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the academic integrity continues to kind of dominate the conversation. I think is creating resistance to some of this innovation with AI. Have you seen results that show that you mentioned you have data a little bit there? Have you seen proof that the AI assessments actually create a more authentic demonstration of learning?
Yes. So that's something that links to academic integrity, and my observation is that conversational AI assessment solved the integrity problem by making it mostly irrelevant. The cheating discourse is about catching students who turn in a chatbot essay, right? But that is the wrong question. The right question is, why did we ask for an essay that a chatbot could write? Academic integrity is not a policing problem, it's a design issue. In the Crucible, for example, the toll booth isn't cheatable the way a paper is because there is no answer to copy. The student is in a conversation. If they paste something from ChatGPT, the gem is coded to push back. When an answer is suspiciously polished, right, or uses phrases that real students would never use, the gem says something like, "That sounds like it might be from somewhere else. Can you explain it in your own words, like you're telling a friend over coffee?" Right?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in a way, the student is encouraged to get comfortable and answer in their own words. So the pattern escalates as the stakes in the assignment escalate. So for example, in the certificate examiner, the gem refers to something that the students said earlier in their own words and asks them to connect it to what they're answering now. And pasted text mechanically cannot pass that test. It's very hard to connect to something that you asked many questions ago. And the verification code itself also flips a flag that I, as the instructor, can see later. And so, but here's the real point for me. A determined student can still cheat. They can paste a ChatGPT answer, edit it to sound casual, maybe add a misspelling here and there. I do not pretend to prevent that absolutely. What I do is make it more work to cheat than to answer.
I think that's exactly I love that approach.
Yeah, so the gem does not punish a partial answer, it scaffolds. So if a student types, "I don't know, can we review this together?" The gem helps them get there.
But again, that's part of that. It is then adding to the learning process, right? It's that iteration aspect. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not just an exam; it's also a formative process.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so if they want extra support, then the notebook LM, the textbook, and the YouTube videos are all linked right there in the course. And so legitimate use of AI is also endorsed. I don't forbid it.
Yeah.
What I changed is the path of least resistance. In a classic essay, the path of least resistance is to copy from AI.
Yeah.
That's the rational choice in a weird way. In the toll booth, the path of least resistance is actually to think. The result is that not that I catch more cheaters. The result is that I build assessments where being honest is actually the easier choice.
Yeah, I love that framing. Like what a great way to introduce AI into a classroom in a way that encourages students, again, to use it as a tool, to see it as an opportunity to learn and not as an alternative to learning. I'm curious because I know that you've got all of these things running in the classroom, but you're also treating this as a research study, right? And you've got IRB approval to collect data on it. Could you talk about what your thinking was there, right? Why was that important, and what sorts of things are you measuring as part of that?
Yeah, this part actually matters to me, and most faculty experimenting with AI in their classroom are not doing it as based on what I know. So in my case, every gem in the Crucible is formally a research instrument. I obtained IRB approval at Santa Clara to treat the course this way, with informed consent from students who choose to participate, data collected systematically across the quarter, and a clear separation between teaching and research use of the same materials. So every version of every gem prompt is logged in a research instrument changelog. And every time I revise a prompt, I record what changed, why, when, and which student cohort encountered which version. So if somebody 2 years from now wants to replicate or critique this work, the audit trail is all in place.
Amazing.
And the reason I do this is partly that UCSF lab habit. It doesn't switch off when I walk into the classroom. But if a result is real, it should be defensible against the same standards I would defend a Nature paper. So it's also that AI in education is going to be the subject of intense scrutiny in the next several years. And the work that survives that scrutiny will be the work that was instrumental from the start. So it's much harder to add the rigor in retrospect. So lately I have gone a step beyond instruments. So when I design a new unit, I no longer do it alone. I set up a panel of agents. One scores the design against a rubric. The other suggests improvements, applies them, and rescores until it hits 10 out of 10, let's say. Another set of agents play simulated students at different skill levels and with different accommodations.
Oh, wow.
And runs through the materials looking for where they could get stuck. Another set simulates educators and administrators with different priorities, rigor on one end or inclusivity on the other. So by the time a unit reaches a real classroom, it has been pressure tested by a panel of perspectives I would never have access to in a faculty hallway. And the chatbot era of AI in education is already passing. People are not dealing with chatbots anymore. The next era is agent engineering, and it's going to change how courses are designed long before it changes how courses are taught.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point. I certainly agree there. Now, I mean, to that point, right, I think successful AI deployment is so much more than just a chatbot. And you mentioned the Camino system being at the place where a lot of this is served up and delivered. Can you talk about how that Camino tool is kind of stitching together the tutoring, the assessment, the student support experience into a single student experience?
Right. So again, maybe for the benefit of our listener, Camino is what Santa Clara University calls its Canvas instance, and Foothill still calls it Canvas. So that's a bit confusing to me because when I need to refer students to their material, I often mix the two. But beyond that, reality is that Camino is not where the AI lives. Camino is where the evidence is. So the toll booth transcripts land in the gradebook automatically with the timestamp and the score. The boss battle results land there. The certification examiner transcripts land there. From the student side, this is a course like any other, where they log into Camino or Canvas and they find all their assignments there. They do the work, they see the grade. From my perspective, or from the faculty side, it's the difference between a clever AI experiment that lives in someone's personal browser and on the other hand, an instrumented course that the registrar trusts and that I could hand off to a colleague at the end of the quarter without losing anything. So the reason Camino matters here is pretty mundane and also absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Higher end runs on accountable record keeping. Whatever interesting AI work you do, if it does not flow through the system the institution actually uses, it's invisible to the people whose job it is to award credit. So Camino is the layer that makes the rest of this working.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what has the student reaction been to this AI-powered learning experience? Has there been anything surprising?
Yeah, so what surprised me most is not actually what I expected to be surprised about. I thought my students would either reject the gems as a chatbot gimmick or sail through them mechanically, right, by copying and pasting. And neither of that happened. The surprise is how willing they are to argue with them. So there is one design pattern in the course where this shows up most of the times. So each of the 3 units has a toll booth conversation that drops the student into a debate with a gem, as I mentioned earlier. And the gem plays a character. In the metabolism unit, for example, the character is an influencer pushing supplements on the internet. In the genetics unit, it's someone selling designer baby screens.
Oh, wow.
And the immunity unit, it's an anti-vaccine wellness influencer that the students call the wellness warrior, with 1 million Instagram followers who makes 3 confident, misleading claims about vaccines. So the student's job is to debunk her on the record in conversation. And I expected my students to be polite, but they were not. So reading the transcripts, what really surprised me was the originality. One of my students, for example, debunking the claim that POTS had been caused by an HPV vaccine, one of the units, part of our units, wrote, and I quote, "That is as valid as saying, since you ate a sandwich the day before you were diagnosed with POTS, the sandwich gave you POTS." So, that is not a sentence she would have offered in class.
And they actually aren't, like, that's, I guess, one of the good things about anthropomorphizing AI, right, is that they're having realistic conversations, similar conversations you would have in a...
Right. They think there is an intelligence on the other side of the screen. And in a way, that is correct. So, in a classroom, my student would have raised her hand and said perhaps something polite like, well, correlation isn't causation, right? But the gem gave her room to be sharper and wittier, I guess. What I learned from reading these transcripts like hers is that an AI character is a safer opponent than a human professor. There is no social risk in saying you're wrong and here's why, right? They have been so well trained to defer in class that they have never argued for anything out loud. So the wellness warrior and the 2 characters like her give them a place to practice. And honestly, the most pleasant surprise of this entire week did not come from the classroom. It came from the Pope. Pope Leo the 14th released his first encyclical yesterday called Magnifica Humanitas. And chapter 4 there is about education in the age of AI.
Yeah.
And the line that stopped me cold was his appeal that the desire to ask questions in young people must not be extinguished by perfect machines that make human thought seem useless.
Wow.
That is almost word for word, the design principle of the toll booth. I built a machine that refuses to be perfect on purpose so that students keep asking questions.
Yeah.
And to find that argument in a papal encyclical the day before this recording was a strange and welcome.
That is pretty amazing, yes.
Fantastic. I mean, thank you so much for that, because I think that, in a lot of conversations I've had with faculty members, with folks in administrations, there's this real temptation to feel like AI is something that happened to them, but that it's not something that they can control or steer or influence. And I think that's such a great reminder to all of us that this is the time to have the conversation about what we want AI to look like in the classroom. And so, as you look forward, what are you out there seeing, from your peers or from others in higher education that's not quite right about AI? Right? What are folks missing, and what are the opportunities that you see for them right now to get those things right or to get engaged?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up because I'm very passionate about this issue here. So, what higher ed is getting wrong is that we are treating AI as a threat to academic integrity. AI is not a threat to academic integrity, it's an indictment of academic assessment. Look at what we are still doing. If you take a student in 2026, lock them in a room, take away their phones and their laptops, and hand them a number two pencil and a piece of paper, you are not testing their knowledge. You are preparing them for the last century's jobs. They know there are tools that can do the basic assessments that we still insist on giving them. The defensive argument is that students should first learn things on their own and only then be introduced to AI.
Mm-hmm.
That holds in some narrow cases. Mostly, though, it's not what students are asking for, and it's not what the workplace they are graduating into wants from them. Students want to be treated as full members of society who
Mm-hmm.
will go out and use every tool available to do their jobs well. Companies have already figured out the cost calculations. They would rather pay $200 a month for ChatGPT Pro or Claude Max and let an AI agent do the basic analytical work than hire a fresh graduate trained to do the same work with a
Mm-hmm.
pencil.
Mm-hmm.
So not allowing students to become AI literate in our classrooms is a deliberate betrayal of our students. It is also a sure way for colleges to go out of business very quickly. Because students are not fools, and neither are their parents, and I am a student parent. I should know about that. They realize quickly that spending $60,000 to $100,000 a year for credentials that prepare them for jobs the market no longer wants is a waste of money. Companies are realizing it too. There is a real college enrollment crisis coming on top of the demographic cliff that is already shrinking enrollment at colleges across the country. So when we have the AI cheating conversation, I would invert it. The real cheaters here are not the students using AI to get through their assignments. The real cheaters are the instructors who cheat students out of their tuition and give them nothing of value by continuing to test them under conditions that have nothing to do with the world the students actually live in. So the good news is that the alternative is achievable. Any faculty member, if I can do it in any discipline, can rebuild assessments around real conversation
Mm-hmm.
in a semester.
Yeah. This is a fascinating conversation. I'm very excited. What can our listeners who want to learn more about what you're doing, where can they go to find out more information?
Well, yeah, so thank you to both of you. This was indeed a lot of fun. For anyone who wants to follow the thinking, my Substack is a good place to start.
Yeah.
It's called Pedagogy Under the Microscope, and the link will...
We'll include the link in the show notes.
Yeah.
We'll include a number of links to your information, and
Great.
even
That'd be great. Yes.
even a link to the Pope's declaration that you just mentioned as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to include that. And for the peer-reviewed version of the writing class data, Brian Bayless, Denise Crane, and I have a paper out earlier this year, as I mentioned, on the DISCO framework. So that can also go into the show notes if you guys want.
Excellent.
And once this quarter ends, I'll put together an anonymized public version of the Crucible course page so that any faculty member who wants to actually look at how the gems and the boss battles and all of that is structured can do that.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's
Fantastic.
Incredible. Excellent. Well, Giorgio, that is our time. You are a fantastic guest. Hopefully we will have you, we'll have you on again in the future to kind of do a recap on how it's gone and look at what you're doing next.
I can't wait for the next opportunity.
That was fantastic. Yeah.
Very great. Thanks, Giorgio.